So, you want to be a digital nomad, eh? Well, great. There's lots of things that you can do as a digital nomad, travel the world. Technology really makes it all possible. And it's something that couldn't have been done 20, 30 years ago. And there's no doubting that the lifestyle can be appealing. All you need is a laptop and your toothbrush, and you're good to go. But just like everything in life, there are pros and cons to wandering the world. Let's take a look at the pros. Well, I suppose the biggest pro is the freedom. You can go where you want, when you want, and you can work from anywhere. As long as you've got Wi-Fi, you're fine. And you can spend time with anyone you wish. And it's awesome to visit countries and stay longer than just a vacation. And you can do lots of in-depth travel, and you can visit out-of-the-way places, and you can really experience what life is like in another country, and that can really expand your mind. And you can set your own work agenda. When you're a digital nomad, you can work when you like, from wherever you like. You don't have to put up with a bullying boss or moaning co-workers. As long as you've got Wi-Fi, you're good to go. And there's no more commuting. All the travel you're doing now is for pleasure and not a chore. And of course, you learn to be less materialistic because everything you need fits into your rucksack. You get to visit lots of new, different, and exciting places. And these are places that most people only dream about. And every day is different. There's no routine. You're not tied to a desk or a cubicle in an office. Every day is different. Everywhere is new and exciting because you're seeing things for the first time. And of course, your horizons expand and you get a greater outlook on the world because you become exposed to things that other people in your town, in your family, your friends, well, they just simply don't know about because they've never experienced it. So you become a much wiser person as a result. And you get increased self-awareness and self-development. Because you have to adapt to different environments and people, you're constantly growing and evolving as a person. And challenging yourself to live without the comforts of a home base, a regular paycheck, and familiar people and surroundings opens up a greater awareness of self because your backdrops and your relationships keep changing, so you become a much stronger person emotionally. And you learn new skills, and you can take what you've learned on the road and apply it to your daily life when or if you get settled again. Lots of people stay on the road all the time. And sometimes you find that they do things better in other countries than they do in the country that you're from. So you can take this knowledge and you can apply it to your life when you get back home, and you can enrich your own life and those of others around you through that experience. You also get to meet lots of new people, experience different cultures, learn different languages, eat different food, and generally do stuff that you would never have dreamt of doing before. But of course, there are some cons to this sort of lifestyle. There is a downside to it all. And the biggest one is loneliness. Being totally self-reliant can be tough. Human beings are social animals, and not having anyone else to talk to be supportive, someone you can trust or you can bounce ideas off of, can take its toll after a while. And of course, feeling homesick is another thing that happens when you're away a lot. You miss the familiar after a while, and you're separated from family and friends and from your support network. And of course, you may worry about people back home, particularly if you've got sick or elderly relatives. People might be in the hospital and you're told they're in hospital and you worry about them and so on. So that can be a big downside if your heart is on one side of the world, but your body is on the other, if you get what I mean. And of course, there's going to be things going on back home that you're not a part of, things like birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, and of course, there are other would-be shared experiences that you're going to be missing out on. Lots of things that your friends and family are doing, but you're not included, and there'll be memories that they have, which are perhaps quite important to them, that you won't be a part of, and you might feel a bit left out of the whole proceedings. And all this can lead to stress, anxiety, and depression, and that is very common amongst people who are digital nomads. And of course, the world can be a scary place, especially when you're off the beaten track. And you never quite know who you can trust or where you'll be 100% safe. Of course, you can be at the mercy of events, things like bad weather, wars, strikes, banks freezing your account, or even not having Wi-Fi that works can wreck your plans. So, being a digital nomad can be a fantastic lifestyle. But you need to think long and hard before embarking on it and make certain it's for you. Living the life of a digital nomad has its attractions. But before you embark on it, you really do need to separate the myths from the realities. And we're going to talk about that in this video. Now let me just sort of set the scene here. You've downloaded the 4-hour work week to your Kindle, and now you want to live the unfettered freelance lifestyle while traveling the world. Correct? Well, let's look at some of the myths. First of all, the myth is you can work when you like from wherever you like. Well, the reality is somewhat different, and because you never know where or when your next paycheck's going to come from, you tend to take on as much work as you can when it's on offer because you think that, well, you might not get any more. So never mind the 4-hour work week. Sometimes it feels like a 100-hour work week. And then in between, of course, it's the 0-hour work week, but not because you want to, it's just because you simply don't have any work to do. There's another myth. Traveling is fun. And the reality? Well, yes, it is, to begin with. But just like with everything else, after a while, it becomes a grind. Every airport, every ferry terminal, and every train station gets to look the same after a while. And you've got all the endless security to put up with, you've got all the endless traveling, you've got the different languages, different currencies, and after a while it just gets to be a real grind. Now, there's another myth. You can get by on much less money. Well, that's true because the reality is you have much less money. But that said, you don't have as many overheads or things to spend money on anyway, so the fact that you don't have quite so much money isn't really a big deal. Another myth, wherever you hang your hat is your home. Well, the reality is somewhat different. If everywhere is home, then nowhere is. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but there's a risk that the place where you grew up or where you went to school or where you settled after you finished college will become a foreign place to you as well, because it's going to change, as will you. But quite often changes are subtle, but to you the changes will be more noticeable, and you'll find it harder to settle back in should you want to return. And for some people, this is appealing. They want to distance themselves from the past and go away and reinvent themselves. Others, though, find losing this connection difficult. Another myth is you'll visit some interesting places and you'll meet lots of new people. In reality, well, this can certainly be true, but it's not all tropical islands out there, and you'll find some places look a lot different to how the tourist board would like you to believe. So you might find somewhere and you see, oh wow, it looks really nice, really interesting, but after you get away from the main streets and into the back streets. They're all kind of grotty, and sort of places that backpackers stay are a bit run down. And of course, it's hard to form lasting friendships or relationships as you're never in one place for very long. And finally, another myth. If you're thinking about it, but you don't do it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And the reality, well, that's true. If you don't do it, especially if you don't do it while you're young or if you're in good health, then you may well regret it later on. And bear in mind, you can always practice by saving up all of your vacation time and or taking a leave of absence from your job and then going away for a couple of months to see how you take to the lifestyle before you take the plunge for real. But it can be very rewarding. Too often, when people decide to live a digital nomad lifestyle, they decide to just simply wing it and go off on a whim. And they think that's all part of the spontaneity of the lifestyle. But there are some things that sometimes digital nomads don't consider. And I'm going to cover the top 6 things in this video. And the first one is having enough insurance. And this is very important, particularly having enough health insurance. Because if you get sick or you have an accident, you'll need to get proper treatment, and that can be expensive. And if you're traveling, you're not just a tourist, then ordinary tourist health insurance may not cover you. So you need to make sure that you are covered for an extended trip. And if you're from a country where healthcare is provided by the government and funded through taxes, like the UK or Canada or something like that, then you may not have needed to consider this before because you just simply take it for granted. You also have to bear in mind that hospitals in some countries may not be up to the standard of those in your home country. And this is particularly true if you're visiting some of the developing countries out there. And so you do need to make sure that any insurance that you have will enable you to be either brought back home or brought to another country where they do have an advanced healthcare system, where they do have good hospitals where you can get the proper treatment. Something else you need to bear in mind if you're from the UK is that UK nationals will lose their right to free treatment on the National Health Service if they're out of the country for a certain length of time. So you may need to also take out private medical insurance to cover you when you get back home as well. So that's something that not a lot of people consider until it's too late. You'll need other types of insurance too. For example, you're going to need car insurance if you're going to be driving. And if you don't have a fixed address, then obtaining this can be very difficult. You're also going to need insurance for your possessions. If your laptop gets lost or stolen, then you could be out of business. You're also going to need insurance to cover you against things like cancelled flights or missed ferries or lost bookings and that sort of thing, especially where you've had to pay up front for these and then they're cancelled and the tour company or the hotel owner just simply shrugs his shoulders and says, oh, well, too bad. Then you might have to take out insurance to cover you against that. Banking can also be difficult when you're traveling, and this is something else that digital nomads often don't take into consideration. You can do all your banking over the internet for sure, but you need to tell your bank where you're going in advance, or they might assume something is fraudulent. If all of a sudden you're from America, but someone's using your card in France, then they might think that perhaps a hacker has stolen your details or something like that, and they'll freeze your account. And then you've got to go through all the steps to get it unfrozen. In the meantime, you haven't got any money. So you do need to take that into consideration. Also, if you're going to use PayPal, PayPal have a habit of freezing or limiting accounts when they're accessed from a different country. So that can be problematic. And if you've ever tried to get in touch with PayPal, you know that they don't make it particularly easy. So you do have to take that into consideration as well. And you also need to bear in mind that PayPal doesn't operate in every country anyway, so you might not be able to pay for things with PayPal in some countries. Now, while the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, and it's usually easy to convert it into other currencies, some countries have foreign exchange controls or currency restrictions. And this could mean a limit on the amount of dollars that you can exchange for their currency, or a limit on their currency that you're allowed to change back into dollars when you leave. And in some countries, they won't even let you take the banknotes out of the country. So you can literally lose money because they won't let you take it with you. So you do have to take that into consideration and make sure that you're going to have enough money in a local currency for the duration of your stay. Now, in the Eurozone, the same currency, the euro, is accepted in more than one country. So if you're going from, say, Ireland to France to Italy, you can use the same currency in all of those different countries. Something else that you need to bear in mind are visas. And when I say visas, I don't mean the credit card type visa. Some countries have a visa waiver or an e-visa program with other countries so that you don't have to apply for a visa in advance. You just simply fill in some details on a website and pay an admin fee. Some countries will issue you a visa on arrival. And other countries don't require a visa at all, just your passport. And this depends, of course, on what arrangement the government of your country has with the country that you intend to visit. However, many countries require you to apply for a visa before you travel. And you may have to visit the country's embassy to apply in person and or attend an interview before a visa is granted. And you have to get there at your own expense. And don't take it personally, but some countries won't let you in if you're from or have previously traveled to a country that they're not on good terms with. So, for example, lots of Arab countries won't let you go to their country if you visited Israel, for example. And are you working or just visiting? Will you need a working visa or a tourist one? Does updating your blog count as work? Well, depends. Some countries will say it does. Some countries will say it doesn't. And then there's tax. Benjamin Franklin said the only two things in life that are certain are death and taxes. And even if you're not in your home country, that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have to pay tax there. So, will you need to pay tax in your home country, the one you're staying in, or both? Now, some countries you're regarded as a resident in that country if you're there for more than a certain number of days, and you may be required to pay their income tax on your worldwide income. It really is quite a minefield out there because every country is different. So it's a good idea to get professional advice before you leave your home country to see exactly what your tax position is going to be. Then, of course, different countries have different systems. For example, you couldn't get this electrical plug into this socket, or this plug into this socket. And of course, there are different voltages. In North America, it's generally 110 volts, but in Europe, it's generally 220 volts. And of course, light switches are different. In some countries, it's up for on and down for off. And in others, it's the opposite. And of course, countries drive on different sides of the road. In the US and continental Europe, people drive on the right and cars have the steering wheel on the left. And in countries like the UK and Australia and Indonesia, it's the other way around. People drive on the left and the steering wheel is on the right. And even if you're not driving a car, this can be a big deal. If you're riding a bicycle, you need to make sure you stay on the correct side. Also, even remembering to look in the right way when you're crossing the street, that is something you need to take into consideration. And finally, there are different languages spoken all around the world. Believe it or not everybody in the world speaks English. Now, in some countries, it's widely spoken as a second language, and this is particularly true in cities with a relatively young population. But in the countryside or off the beaten track, it's a different matter. And of course, some countries use a completely different alphabet, so there's no reference at all. I mean, for example, if you look at this street scene here in Japan, everything's in Japanese. So unless you happen to understand Japanese, you're not going to have a clue. So if you're going to be spending a long time in a part of the world where you know that a particular language is widely spoken, it might be a good idea to get some basic tuition before you go there. Brush up on your Spanish if you're going to Latin America, for example. So there you go, 6 things that most nomads don't consider, but you should do before you start embarking on this type of lifestyle.